Hello. So today I got Andreas, the CEO from Toddle, with me, and we're going to talk about Toddle. It's unscripted. He doesn't know what's going on today. I have no idea what's going on today, so we just see where it goes. Uh, so maybe why don't you tell us maybe like a little bit more before we start about Toddle and open source? I know there are a lot of things being talked about, but maybe we have some secret behind the scenes insights of everything that's coming. And I'll promise you, I won't tell anybody.
That's good to know. First of all, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Yes, so I'm happy to talk about Toddle and open source. I don't know if I have any secrets to share at the moment, but I'll think about it.
Okay.
So yeah, I think most of your viewers, if they've seen your channel before, I think have probably seen some of your videos on Toddle already. So probably already know what it is. But the really short version is that it is a visual programming platform for building web applications. And where a lot of platforms that sort of looks like Toddle and that seems in that same space are very focused on beginners or what they sometimes call non-technical users. Toddle is really designed to be for professional developers, for people who are going to build like really incredible large scale things
Like Shopify
like Shopify. Yeah.
or Toddle.
Shopify is not built in Toddle, by the way, but
No, but
like Shopify.
someone built something like Shopify in Toddle, and then also Toddle is built in Toddle. So if you open Toddle, it's like your testimonial. Like this was built in Toddle.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you mentioned, like we are going open source. And it's gonna be a little bit of a process because we have a lot of code we gotta extract to be open source.
Right.
We also have a little bit of work to do before we can accept community contributions to the actual editor. But the idea is that the runtime, which is the code you need to run your Toddle applications, as well as the whole editor, is going to be open source. So you could run the whole setup on your own infrastructure or even on your own machine if you want, entirely without our hosting service. And the bit that we then keep and becomes our primary business is the hosted option, where you very easily can just go and spin up a bunch of Toddle apps and play around and share it with the community.
So you will charge for convenience, but the people who like to run their own Toddle apps in their basement, they can do that too.
Exactly. Exactly.
Beautiful.
We wanted it to be like all great frameworks and most of the technology the internet is based on. We wanted to be an open source solution that nobody is ever like worried about running. Like
Yeah.
when you go out as a large organization and buy software, there's all these concerns of like, well, what kind of licensing is it? What
Yeah.
happens if they change their pricing model? What kind of service level agreement can they have? And like you always want, if you're betting a lot on the software, you want an out. You want a way of saying, well, if everything goes wrong and this company like quickly pulls and changes their pricing, I want to have another option, right?
Yeah.
And by making sure the whole software is open source, you always have the option. So, well, okay, then I'm not gonna get the convenience of hosting, but I can run it myself in worst case scenario, right?
And this is so interesting because I work with clients, and most of the bigger clients are always like, yeah, I'm not really convinced of having this built in tool X because I can't export the code, or we can't maintain old versions and all of that. And I saw like an influx of people approaching me and asking not about all the other tools I know, but asking me all about Toddle. They say, yo, our company loves Toddle because it's open source, so we can maintain it ourselves. And uh, this is I think it's very interesting because most of the clients that I see that would go to other, no code solution, low code solution, they are mid-sized businesses. But now I see bigger businesses, mid-size and up, being starting to get an interest in low code, no code, which they probably didn't have before, because now there is something open source out there, and they say, hey, they see it like a framework. And I had a lot of people tell me it's the next React. A lot of big companies with like hundreds of employees, they said it's the next React, and they actually saw my YouTube videos and said, "Hey, uh, you got to tell us more about it. I was like, I've been only using it since 4 weeks, but here's my view of it. And I learned Toddle in like a day. It was super simple. People always ask me, what's the learning curve? I was like, there is no learning curve. Like, you've seen worse.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting because I mean I start out by saying this is a tool for professional. It's for people who are building apps professional, and I
I
really
mean,
do
back up.
believe
I
that,
know
and that is
JavaScript, so for me, it was like a day learning curve.
yeah. So I mean, if you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like our philosophy is like we're only going to improve where we can actually add value. HTML and CSS are really tried and tested technologies. They're fantastically great, and they do exactly the job they're supposed to do. So Toddle is really just the visual interface for HTML and CSS when it comes to like creating your web app and styling it. We're really not inventing anything here. It's every feature in Toddle has a direct correlation in either CSS and HTML. In JavaScript, it's a little bit different because there we're getting into the sort of programming thing. And when you're building large applications in JavaScript, like today, nobody will really do that without a framework. Like you're always bringing in either React or Vue, Angular, any of these modern frameworks, right? So in that case, in that sense, it's not quite one-to-one JavaScript because Toddle is kind of both the language and the framework in one. But it's extremely heavily inspired by React. You can see the correlation, like it's almost a one-to-one on features. Underneath, it works very different, but the developer experience is very similar.
It's like React, the new version of React. React in low code. A visual React.
Yeah,
Perfect. Don't get in trouble with her trademark. Um,
no, well, I hope we'll be fine.
Perfect. Yeah, but I really like Toddle because it reminds me a little bit of Xano, but for the front end. Because in Xano, it's based on PHP. So if you know what the filters of the PHP names are, replace, set, you can manage your way around Xano. And the biggest obstacle I had in Toddle was like, how the heck am I doing? How the heck am I going to find the size of an array? And I was like, wait a sec, let's just put this in a sentence. I need the size of an array. So I was typing, is there like a thing in Toddle called size? And yes, there is a block called size. I had my array, I put my size
Yeah.
on there, and I was like, okay, now I got the size, it needs to be greater. I already saw the JavaScript, and then I was like, let's type in greater. Oh, there is like a block for greater. So it's like one-to-one like JavaScript would be, but it's like blocks and kind of like when I would build a web app, I would make myself a mind map. I would make myself a flow chart with how the flow works. And then I would start programming it in JavaScript. But in
Yeah.
Toddle, the flow chart is the JavaScript. And this is what I think is very revolutionary because it's one-to-one like the code would be.
Yeah. And so we really like the formulas and actions are technically their own programming language. Like
Yeah,
it isn't JavaScript. And while obviously since it runs in the browser, it eventually gets turned into JavaScript,
yeah,
that's not quite a one-to-one translation. It's pretty close, but it's not quite. So we
right.
do take some liberties on that part. I think one example I like to bring up is like if you've ever tried sorting an array in JavaScript, like there's a 50-50 chance you get it right the first time. And if you've been coding JavaScript for 20 years, there's still a 50-50 chance you get it right. Because I mean, is it the first or the second? Is it -1 for like it's just a weird way that function works and nobody can ever remember it. So we just are like we changed the way that work. We have a new interface for how to sort and it's significantly easier, but you can do all the same things, right? And so that's kind of our approach. We default back to like whatever is familiar, and most of our developers are going to know a bit of JavaScript. If we have a good reason for changing it, we will change it because it's not actually JavaScript that you programming, right? But anyone knowing JavaScript is going to understand it right away. You search a little bit in the formula select, and you'll find what you're looking for.
Yeah, I never had anything in Toddle where I'm like, how do I do this? I was like, what's the name of it? That was always my issue.
Yeah,
Because I was like dot length, and I was like, oh, maybe they call it size, and then I got size, and then I was like, oh, that's dot length.
yeah. It's like length is kind of a JavaScript. Like most languages went with size. And when you talk to people Like even JavaScript developers say, what's the size of the array? And you get the size of the array by calling that length. And then we kind of went, okay, let's go with size then. So we're
Perfect.
not as strict. Like with HTML and CSS, we're really like one-to-one. Like it is an exact translation throughout, right?
Yeah,
With JavaScript, we're a little bit, or the formulas and workflows, we're a little bit more, like we're a little bit more opinionated.
of course. And I mean, I have a question. Like, how does it work with scalability in Toddle? Like, can you build things that get millions of views a day in Toddle, or are there limitations?
So one of the interesting things about scalability is that it's kind of a term that floats around and it has a lot of different meanings.
Yeah.
So when you talk about scalability, you can talk about how many users can this thing handle, right?
Yeah.
That's one way of talking about scalability.
Yeah.
The other way of looking at scalability is how complex is the application you can build, like how many different things, components, pages that are all living in the same project can you actually reasonably manage.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I think is an interesting approach is like how many developers can you work on the project at the same time.
Well, I never
And
thought
these
like this about
all
scalability.
actually no, but they all actually fit into scalability because they can all be
Yeah.
limiting factors, but it's different things that like it's different features of a platform that makes them potentially a problem, right? In
Yeah.
terms of numbers of users, like since Toddle is a front end only platform, that generally just isn't that much of a problem because like as you're running the platform, like you're running it mostly on the user's device. So the
Yes.
code, like the stuff you build in Toddle runs on customer. We're also server-side rendering things. We're also proxying requests to get rid of things like course issues. And if you've got JavaScript developer, front-end developer audience, they know what that is. If you don't know what that is, you don't need to know. And that's a good thing because they're horrible to deal with.
Oh yeah,
Um,
they're a nightmare. I love
oh,
it.
they're, you have to, and you go and look all the time. Okay, what is that I need to do to fix this, right?
I think I made like
Um,
5 videos on course errors on this channel.
it's so annoying. And
Or
what we
failed to
do
fetch.
is, yeah, and so we host on cloud infrastructure and specifically on edge infrastructure with Cloudflare. And that means that we always have a data center close to you, no matter where you are. I think there's like almost 400 data centers on Cloudflare, right?
Wow.
And that means that we can actually take your request from the client device and bounce it through one of these data centers that Cloudflare has without adding a lot of extra weight. Like even if you the server you are like calling, like wherever that is, because the data center is close to the user, it doesn't add really any delay that it bounces through there. But that means we can deal with things like course. We can do a handle authentication in a way that's like a lot more secure. We can store your token in secure cookies
You do it
and
like on the
never
back
actually
end,
expose
right?
them to the client. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was like, this was like the first thing that really shocked me. I was like, why can't I see my cookie on the front? And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to see the cookie on the front. This is great because, if you look at this is so fun. There were like people that says, oh, use Midjourney, just take the cookies and you can use the cookies to then call their API because they don't have an official API. And then they had like all those bots like just signing up on the side and calling it. I was like,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have that issue if they would build it on Toddle.
No. And I think like one of the things about authentication is that it's always one of those things that you need it for every app. You ideally don't want to build it yourself because if you make a mistake and just one, it can be a really big issue, right?
I
Um,
actually made a video today on authentication in Toddle. It was 2 hours. It was live, no cuts, nothing. I wanted to show
nice.
everybody. Normally, you would spend a week or half a week building this. In Toddle, I show you, we could do the step by step. And there were, of course, some things that went, sideways. And then, but with debugging, with everything, it took less than 2 hours. Live, you can watch the video. I will put it in the description. But it's super fast. And I'm shocked how fast I can build stuff. I actually had a client that I quoted 2 weeks in development, and I actually finished it in 2 days.
I've got some very unfortunate news for you because we've got some really, really cool updates to that coming out probably next week, if not this week. So we've upgraded like a lot of the ways we manage these cookies, and the editor is going to have a lot better insight into when your cookies are set. So you get like a whole visibility in like, do I actually have an auth cookie while I'm trying to make this request? Like the actual
When do you
workflow
fix
around that is gonna be a
redirects
lot
though?
nicer.
When do you fix redirects? Because they're a little bit. Ah,
That's not gonna be next week, but it is on the V2 of the API that we're
okay.
gonna roll out pretty soon.
Because like
Um,
redirects, they like if I redirect to a Toddle page, I always have to refresh the editor because I was like, it's just like just.
mm. Oh yeah, but we have a system now where if you're, let's say you're trying to fetch data and it turns out you're not
Yeah.
logged in, so you get from your API a response back saying, no, user's not authenticated. And then you want to redirect to a login page.
Yeah.
Today in Toddle, that actually loads the page and then redirects. But
Yeah.
we're adding support for redirect rules. So right on that API on the
We
server
execute it on
before
the
it even comes
server.
back. Yeah. So you'll be instantly redirected without that sort of little mini flash of content.
And this is also great for security, right? Because people,
Mm.
if you would have like if you would have like hard-coded protected content on that page, that page would never reach the user.
Yes. Though I still wouldn't recommend you doing
Of
hard code to
course.
protect. But yes, that would
In
still be
theory,
true.
it yes, like
Yeah.
developer, no, don't do this. But if you would
Yeah.
do this, it would still be protected. You can't just disable JavaScript or something like this, and it says, "Oh, here you go."
Exactly.
Wonderful. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Oh, there's like the new API version they're working on right now is going to be really nice. It's got a lot of feature packed into it. It's got a brand new UI look and feel. It's going to be really nice. But
This is
it's still
amazing.
going to fundamentally work like, so it's not like you don't have to learn anything over, right?
Oh, that's
It's going to be
great.
a
So
nice update.
we don't have to start becoming JavaScript developers or something.
But I mean, the technologies that underpin both are the same, right?
Yes, of
Like
course.
we have a very strong sort of belief that we want to, like, we'll definitely invent the wheel if we feel like we can make a better wheel. Like we don't have any problem with that. But a lot of times, like we like, just to make it different doesn't make any sense, right?
Right, right.
So if we can teach people Toddle, and as a side effect, they also learn how HTML, CSS work, how the broad browser talks to the server, how HTTP request headers, like how everything about how being a web developer, everything about that. If that's what you learn while you're learning Toddle, for us, that's a massive win, right?
Right. And I actually see most of the low code tools, no code tools are great ways to learn web development, but most of them I see like only as an educational tool. You use this tool, you learn it, you grow sometimes out of it, and then you start writing your own code. With Toddle, it's really one of the only tools, if not the only tool, where I have the feeling I can learn it on there, but this is something I can continue even after I learned it on, because there's way more to learn. There's always more to
Yeah,
learn in Toddle.
yeah, for sure. And I think that generally what you're learning is, like, very quickly, I think in your case, you sort of learned how Toddle work. And now the question is, how do I solve this problem? Like
Yeah,
as a developer, right? It's not
yeah,
so much about how it's solved in Toddle, just how is it solved in general. Like
yeah.
it's the same strategy if had you written the JavaScript or if you're building it in Toddle, right? It's the same basic idea.
Also, one
Um,
thing that would really like make a game changer, if inline styles from ChatGPT generated code in Toddle would be translated to the normal Toddle style configurations, this would be perfect.
yeah, actually, I mean, so I already have the code for doing that because I've been
Amazing.
working on my own code gen, like based on Claude actually. So
Oh, Claude is even better.
yeah, and so we're releasing that at some point. We're still polishing it. There's still a little bit more work to do, but
Right.
we've got like two AI features coming out. One of them is that you can generate like basically HTML, CSS, like the
Made in
content and
Toddle?
styling. Yeah, it's built into Toddle. But part of that is also going to be passing the styles. So we'll also update our paste. So if you're pasting stuff in, if you want to generate it in ChatGPT, right? As long as it's HTML with either inline style, or I actually found Tailwind is the best. because Tailwind lets you do hover styles and all sorts of things. So Tailwind is like the real key to AI generating code. And like, I think V0 figured that out with Vercel. But so we actually pass in the new one, we pass Tailwind classes and translate them to Toddle. So you get that, like, you can either paste them from V0 if that's your thing, or you'll be able to generate them directly in Toddle, right?
Perfect. So we'll all learn how to do the Tailwind syntax in AI, and then we'll transform it to Toddle syntax.
You don't need to know it, right? Because the AI will generate it, and
Even
Toddle will
better.
pass it, and it doesn't really matter what the interim is, right?
I love the Toddle things for me. I have to think less. Less headaches. Perfect.
But
This
yeah,
is
we played
great.
around. We're also adding AI code gen to the like custom formulas and actions, right? So you can go in and say, I need a formula. If there's something Toddle can't do, you can always extend it with a custom formula or custom action, depending on the kind of thing you're doing. And right now you can write JavaScript to do that, but we're sort of adding an AI in there that, and again, it's going to be Claude probably. You can basically say, I want a function that, or I want an action that asks if I can use the Bluetooth device on a client's phone. Right? Okay, it'll generate
Now
that for you.
every Toddle app will request Bluetooth access.
Yeah. Well, I did a demo a while back with a PlayStation controller on a Toddle app on a 12
No
to 10 point.
way. You did? Oh
Yeah,
God, this is
because I
amazing.
mean, these are all APIs in the browser now. They added a ton. And I mean, we're trying to add as much as we can, but there's like Bluetooth wasn't very high on our list of
I
things to add
actually
natively
worked on
to Toddle.
something
Right?
for NFC, if that makes you happy.
Nice. Yeah. But that's also, again, and that's because you can add like your custom actions. You're essentially extending Toddle with functionality that it didn't have.
Yeah.
And in many ways, you're doing it exactly the same way we would do it if we had to build it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like it doesn't feel like a second-hand thing, because it's just there's a list of things that Toddle can do, and now you added one more.
Right. And
Um,
I built like the mobile apps I built in Toddle with Despia, they all turned out great. I built
yeah,
one that is like an NFC card reader because WeWork still doesn't have hold your phone on the door to unlock it. So I was like, I'm fed up with this. So I built myself an app in Toddle, and the only thing it does is like opening my door. And I have it on test flight. I gotta renew it every 90 days, otherwise I'll lose it on my phone, but it works great.
ah, that's nice.
So
Yeah,
I mean, you always say build more useless apps, and I certainly took that very seriously.
I mean, getting into your office is not the worst idea in the world. But yeah, I mean, that it's kind of a mantra I've had a lot, and it's a little bit just my sort of philosophy. I think there's something really magical about software development. Like there's something about that feeling you get when you build something and it works, and you're like, it's super cool, and you show your wife and she's extremely not impressed, but it doesn't matter because you think it's cool. Like there's something about that feeling of like, I made this, right? I have a friend who's like just getting into programming now, at I think 43.
Hopefully
and
with
and
Toddle.
No, actually, he's because I said like go and learn the basics first, and then like you're probably not going to
Okay.
get. It's going to be harder to get a job in Toddle than it is to get in React today,
That's
right?
a
So
good
if you're
point. That's a
changing
good
career,
point.
start there, and then we'll talk, right? But he made a picture of a cat in CSS, and like the joy it brought this middle-aged man, right? It's fantastic, and I agree, it is awesome, right?
It
And that
is
idea,
fantastic.
that mentality of just building things and not like worry less about, is this going to be the most important thing in the world? Go and
Yeah.
find the joy in building it, because you learn so much better when you do
Yeah.
that.
I have like already like I think 80 projects on my Toddle account, and they're all useless. Uh,
Yeah.
I built one thing that's not that use is cloning humans. So
Ooh.
we clone humans in Toddle AI. So we clone AI avatars. You record a 3-minute video of yourself. You got to make a consent video so I can train more AI on it. And
Yeah.
and then we have like AI Andreas doing customer service in a video chat Zoom like thing for Toddle and answering questions. And API tokens, like, don't have this run longer than 50 minutes. Yeah, you're going to go broke, but
Don't like anything about this idea at all. Yeah. But it seems like you're releasing a small army of AI clones, yes.
I
But
need
this is
your
what I
consent
mean, like
first,
build
but
exactly build things for the sake of building it. And then when you want to build that project that actually makes sense and might be a business, might make money, you know how to build it, right? Like
yeah,
it's nice not having to learn everything from scratch. Like I built one of my favorites is band.toddle.site. I built
I don't know
that
what you
for
did.
a talk. You just type band.toddle.site into a browser.
Band.toddle.site.
Yeah. And it gives you a random instrument from a drum kit. So band.toddle.site. Um, and you can do that on your phone next to your friends, and it'll give you a random part of a drum kit. And when you tap the screen, it'll play the sound. And if you're 4 or 5 friends, now you have a drum kit.
That's
Like
amazing.
that's it. Like that's all it does, right? It doesn't do anything more. And if you do this in a large room with a lot of people watching, it sounds terrible because everybody is testing at the same time.
Let me
But
share my
it's
screen. You can see it. That's all it
yeah.
does.
But if you refresh it, you get another one.
Oh, that's
So you'll
cool.
just get a random instrument every time you load the page, right? And if your friends are nearby you on phones, they do the same, and now you have a band, right? And it
We
is
got we
pretty
gotta combine
useless.
this. We gotta combine this with like the AI singing generator I built in Toddle. We can make some
Exactly.
nice choirs.
But that's sort of like this was for demo for I think a Webflow meetup group somewhere, right? But it's just sort of an idea. But these like building these like pointless things for the sake of learning it, building up a portfolio of stuff you learned, it's a really good way to get going. And also because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't always realize that when you're building applications, and maybe your audience are well aware of this, right? But we get a lot of people coming in and saying, "How do I build a to-do list? How do I build a directory app? How do I build a yoga app? How do I build?" And the answer to all those questions are technically all the same, right?
Yeah.
Because the basic idea is like it's all just data, right? A yoga app and a directory app and a to-do app like has maybe 80% in common. Like
Yeah.
you're 80% doing the same thing,
It's always
styling
very
it different and
interesting.
slightly changing the data model, right?
People always say, "Oh, I want to build Airbnb in Toddle," and then someone else
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, but yeah, you made this Airbnb video. Can you also make a video for a hotel site?" I was like, "Those sites will be the same. They just have a different
Yeah.
UI."
Yeah. And then people go and say like I want a place where I can see nearby local yoga studios, right? And you go, just change the pictures and the listings. It's the same app, right? The functionality is like
Yeah.
and I think this understanding that and understanding that when you're problem solving and developing, it's not about how do I build a to-do app.
Yeah.
It's about understanding it at the programming level and saying like how should this feature actually work. It doesn't matter if the title of the field is yoga studio or it's like Airbnb house or like that's not the point. How do I abstract it away to a point where I understand that all these things are accumulated knowledge. So by building a silly little band app, right, I now know efficient ways to play a sound in Toddle because actually it's a little bit harder than you think. You can't do it on a click event because that's when you release the screen. So then you can't play music, right? So you gotta like that's when you realize that it actually has got to be on the touch event on the screen because if it's not when the touch event starts, you're gonna have a 300 millisecond delay, and in musical instruments, that's a no-go, right? You also realize that you need to
Oh,
preload all your sounds because otherwise it's gonna need to load the sound the first like all these little things that are like tiny details of a band silly play a hi-hat app becomes relevant when you build the next thing, right? They're all accumulated knowledge about how do we build applications
and then
and
you
they
can build like,
all help,
and then you
right?
can build like something like a garage band.
Yeah, exactly. Or like our T-Beat Pro, our beat, what's it called, Beatbox app,
Oh
right?
yeah, that was amazing what you did
Yeah,
there. That was,
and it's
and the
all
U
it
and
uses
the
all the same
UI
ideas.
looked like, it looked like a real thing, like the UI with the 3D thing, and I'm like, wow. This
That's
is
just a lot of gradients and box shadows.
I still know how to do those. I only know 2D. Um, but this is amazing. Um, so anything super exciting that we need to know about Toddle? Like anything, let's see, someone is just looking this and they're like choosing, should I use this tool? Should I use Bubble? Should I use Toddle? Should I use WeWeb? What makes Toddle different and what makes Toddle future-proof?
Oh, yes. So I think that's probably the most important part because I think there's a lot of things that Toddle can do now that other tools can't, or at least don't do as well. And there's
Yeah.
also things where other platforms have a leg up. The biggest one is that, like, if you just want to build an app really quick and like it's all about getting it out the door within the next day or two, right? There are really good platforms that like a Software Glide
Yeah.
are kind of like get started. They've got a whole set of pre-built components. You just drag them in. Toddle doesn't have a single pre-built component. Like we give you absolutely nothing. You get all the HTML elements that are built into the
We get a
browser,
button.
and you get a button, but that's because it's been there since like 93, right? Otherwise, you get nothing. You get a video element because they added it to the browser. Anything outside of that, like you got to build it. And Toddle is built in a way where you can build anything on top of that. And what we then added is we have a package system where anyone can go and build a package. So these components that becomes more complex, that you're building on top of the basics, you can share them. Other people can install them into their projects. So everybody doesn't have to start from scratch all the time, right?
Yeah.
But that's
Like
kind of a
editor
slow
JS.
process. Yeah, editor like yeah, you have a editor JS, like the color picker we built in Toddle for Toddle. We made that a package. I recently did a spring animation library.
Oh yeah, with Vaca
Uh,
doing like this.
yeah, bouncing him back and forth. Yeah, I should have probably asked him first, but yeah, I think he likes it. Um, but so we added a few, and the community added a lot. But I think if you compare that to like what software can do today, like software's way ahead, right?
Yeah.
But if you're looking at future proofing, like our vision is really that we want to build a platform, not just where you can build your app, but where there's a whole community that can build all the stuff that they need, right? So
Yeah.
we need these packages. Like they're a key part of getting Toddle to really succeed, having the community build all the things like the Despia package, right? Like you basically, when you build a Toddle app, you can just install that and now you
I
have
think it
access
was
to
so
all
fun
this
because
native
I
functionality, right?
talked with Bacchus the first time. I was like, I need like a Despia package. And he was like, oh, just build yourself. I was like, I thought first he was like being disrespectful. I was like, no, it's so simple.
I mean, that's the other side. There's a certain joy of saying just do it yourself. It's also I mean, it's maybe 20% of why we're open sourcing Toddle is now that when people ask you, just you do it. Um, but I think but in this case it makes sense because like yeah, for Despia, like we could have done that, right? That would be
Yeah.
feasible.
But
But
I mean,
next
I
year
probably
we
could have done that way better because I know my product in and out. So
exactly, right? And it would have been a lot of back and forth. And
yeah,
next year, like there's gonna be a lot more packages being built. And at some point it's gonna be impossible for us to do all of it, right?
yeah,
Like we want Toddle to grow much faster than we can as a company
yeah,
because that's how we made it succeed. And it's not just about getting Toddle and especially Toddle. It's not just about getting Toddle, the company, to succeed, but it's also really about like bringing about this new idea that visual programming and having tools with a very high degree of like usability and user experience can be the future of programming, right? Like we're still all kind of stuck in text editors, and they're really cool text editors that can do a lot of things, but they're still text editors, right?
yeah,
And I mean that's not the best. That's not the best possible interface for programming, right?
yeah,
It's a hard problem, and there's a lot of things to do. But if we can grow that community, if we grow those packages, so you have everything you need to build your application, and also if we can open source Toddle so that it's not just us contributing, but you might have something that you can't do in Despia because it requires an actual change in the editor or a change in how the Toddle programming language work. And we might be entirely aligned with that and think that's a great contribution, but we just don't have the bandwidth to do it right now.
right.
I mean, that's going to be the reality. Like
You
we
let me
always
mess
have
up
to
your
choose a
source
little
code.
bit. Exactly. You go and take the source code, make the change. If it looks good and we agree with the direction, right? We'll merge that in, and now you can continue and build the thing
Can
with it.
I edit it in Toddle or do I have to edit it in somewhere else?
So the editor itself is built in Toddle, right? So everything around how that works, that's just opening up Toddle and
So
building
I
Toddle in
can I
Toddle, right?
can I can make the updates in Toddle inside of Toddle.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you that question. If you change a button in Toddle, like let's say you make all buttons pink and you publish
Yeah.
the branch, how random is it that then now all your buttons in the editor where you build Toddle in are pink now too? Like, you get what I'm
So
trying
this
to
is,
say?
I mean, this happens like all the time, right? Because it's actually part of our like normal workflow. I'll just share my screen. I'll show you what I mean.
I think I have to allow you. Oh, yeah, here you go.
Right. So this is like the Toddle project, and here are all our different. Here's all our different like branches. So I
I'm
was
just trying to
playing
see if I
around.
can. I'm just trying if I can see something that's like secret or something.
It's nothing. We don't really have a lot of secret things here, to be honest. I mean, also anything you can see that's secret now. When we're gonna open source it, so you'll be able to see all this yourself, right? So it's not gonna be very secret for long. So here's the thing I was working on. I was working on the CSS editor. Well, actually, no. Let's do a better one. Here's the browser extension, the one I said we're gonna, the one we're gonna release soon, right?
Yeah.
And so what this actually does is that if you are looking in the project, oh yeah, don't mind too much the message coming down here. I've been playing around with AI features, and this
Oh,
one basically just gives you a notification based on how many issues, like if it detects issues in your page, and it'll be more and more rude depending on how many issues you have. This is not released. We're not going to release it. It's only internal at the Toddle
I
team.
would say this is not a
But
very
this
nice message.
No, it's listen here, you incompetent excuse for developer. You've managed to rack up a mind-boggling 30 issues in your project. Are you actually trying to create the most broken, unusable piece of garbage in the history of no-code development, right? So we're probably not releasing it. I think we ended up not, but I wanted to play around with this idea of like instead of AI always being code generation, like what can we actually use it for, right? What are the
maybe
because I
maybe phrase
think
it a little bit better.
yeah, the prompt I gave it here is like as you're going up in the issues, like once you're past 20, you should basically act like Linus Torvalds, the guy who built Linux and Git, and he's like famously, well, he's exactly like this actually. They nailed it. So that was the prompt I gave it. Like it'll start out if you have one with just a single issue, it's very polite, but then it becomes very rude when you have a lot. We're probably not releasing that. I don't think that's going to be a part of it. But we had a lot of fun with it internally, and we knew we wanted a way to sort of highlight that actually there's some stuff you need to fix here, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, what we have here is actually the project. Whoop, sorry, new keyboard. All right, here, project sidebar. And we've got this little cookie button here, and this is what I talked about. And this is essentially going to be saying, actually, you haven't
Oh,
installed the browser extension. You need that. And when you click it, it'll take you to install that. And then afterwards, you'll actually be able to see what cookies are set in the app you're building.
that's
One of the
amazing.
things, one of the things you might have covered in your video is that like knowing if you're actually logged in and the session cookie set is kind of not that obvious. Like you
Yeah,
do it, and if you've done it right, it works,
I
right?
showed in the video, I was like, you just add a paragraph on the lower part of your page. You click on the formula,
Yeah,
and now you
that
can
kind of
see
thing,
it.
right? Yeah, and the thing is, like that's often how I develop anyway. And one of
Yeah.
the really nice things about it is that if you've been coding for a long time, you know that occasionally you forget to throw out the error message and
Oh yeah.
like actually handle it. And the interesting thing is, in Toddle, the easiest way to get the error message is actually to put it on screen, which is probably
Yeah.
what you also wanted to do when you actually build it. So, like at the end of that exercise, very often all you need to do is style the error message.
Yep.
So, it actually somehow worked out really well. It wasn't entirely designed, but so in this case, if I take like the branch name here, browser extension, and with Toddle, I can always there we go. Sorry, new keyboard. It's weird. Don't know where the keys are. Right. So if I can sort of prefix this with the branch name, and then I'm actually loading. Then this is actually the branch I'm loading up in Toddle. So now I'm
Oh,
editing the
no
editor
way.
as I'm loading it, right? So now I've got that little cookie thing down here.
No way.
And this
So you're like,
sometimes get like this can get a bit funky, right? Because I
I
also have like,
imagine, I imagine, like, how do you not get confused?
oh, I mean, sometimes you do. Like sometimes you hit the wrong branch and it gets a bit weird. I didn't have that one, so it doesn't matter. Um, but it can actually be really nice to sort of, because you're experience it like firsthand at the same time, right?
Yeah.
We don't always run the branch you're editing at the same time. Again, as I said, because that if you break something, like now you can't fix it and you have to go back to the other one. But it can sometimes be a really nice way of working, of actually saying, oh wait, I it does work. I'm running it on the actual like live in my browser now. So
And
yeah,
this is why
that's
Toddle has
like when we're
branches.
building Toddle, like that's yeah, exactly. I mean, in the early days of building Toddle, like when I really, because the very first version was built in React, and then as I got to a point, I realized that I needed to build something big in Toddle to verify that it really worked, and also React was getting a bit cumbersome because React is a great framework, but if you have, I don't know how many components we have on the screen right now, but I
I
think it's
think a
over
few
a
million.
thousand. I think it's probably in the low or mid thousands. Like
Oh
there's
God.
quite a lot, right? Because like
Yeah.
each line of this is actually a new component, and it's actually got several because the icon is own. Like there's a lot of components on screen at the same time. And in React can handle that, but you got to be very careful about always making sure which part gets updated when you make changes. It's not
Oh.
really an ideal use case for React.
So
So
you were fed up with React and building Toddle in it, and then you said, you know what? We gotta build Toddle in Toddle because that's the way to do it.
yeah, pretty much. Like
I love it.
it was like a performance issue that I was like, okay, now we're just gonna let's just go and do it because Toddle doesn't quite have the same issues. Like underneath the hood, it works different than React.
So maybe someday
Um,
we'll be exporting .toddle files.
yeah, but I mean, we are probably never gonna do any sort of code export from
Right.
Toddle
Because you have like
because
self-hosting.
yeah, I mean, we're open sourcing it. Like the file is stored in a JSON format, and you can like use that. And I don't really think that from us there's a ton of value add for doing that as a company, right?
Right.
But there's no reason why anyone else couldn't, right?
There you go.
I've got a mate who thinks that the most important thing Toddle could possibly do was to generate React code. I'm like, well, I'm not going to build it, but I'm going to open source it. So if you want to do it, be my guest, right? And I think that's the other part of like when we're making it open source, the point really here is that like we are still obviously running a business. We're going to be the best place to host your app, and
Yeah.
obviously since we're building the editor, we've got a leg up there. We can make sure we're always the best place to host your app, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to build a ton of feature into our hosting platform that you're not going to get, you have to build yourself or get somewhere else if you're not using our platform, right? Because not everything is about the editor,
So
right?
maybe we won't have one-click export coming. Maybe it's 2 clicks, like you made a fun up in the Discord.
Yeah, right. Pretty much, right. Well, or the click will be in another tab. Yeah,
And they have to re-enter their password.
yeah. I mean, but then you'll be able to like extract all the Toddle data, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what if people want to export it to React, like we're going to open source the language specification, we're going to open source the runtime, so all of this works. You can absolutely one-to-one translate the Toddle code into a React app, right? You
Wow.
can build that compiler if you want to. And I mean, if Toddle is successful enough, eventually someone will. Like
Yeah.
that's almost a given, right? It's not on our priority list. Like it's not something that we think adds a ton of value right here.
I mean, didn't TechCrunch say if you can build it in React, you can build it in Toddle?
Yeah.
Or was that just Vargas quoting it?
No, I mean that's a quote from us, right? But I
Okay.
think we often when because people keep asking, can I build like a yoga app in Toddle? Right? But can I build this thing in Toddle? And more experienced developers, you just have to say we build Toddle and Toddle, and then they stop asking because they understand the complexity of building something like that, and then go,
Yeah.
well, if you can do that, then all these problems have to be solved, right? But
Yeah.
that's not everyone hasn't tried building something like Toddle, right? So it's I think it's
I'm
hard
trying to get
to
close.
understand.
I'm trying to get close. I'm actually rebuilding the whole Gatsby editor now in Toddle. Thank you so much
Nice.
for sending me some of your Toddle, your internal Toddle components. Really helped.
Oh yeah, absolute, no problem. But I mean, it's just a matter of time before they all become publicly available, right?
Yes. So
Like it's again everything that's part of the Toddle. It's not just that you can edit the Toddle editor. It's like if I like, as we say we have here, like if the color picker here, we've already exported that, right?
yeah.
We also have a nice. Maybe I'll not screw with this branch too much. I'll just go. I have a secret component that generally only I edit here. But we also made like a shadow editor that I'm quite a big
Yes.
fan of, right?
I love that
And
shadow editor.
again,
It's amazing.
yeah, and if you wanna do that one, it's like it's built in Toddle, like it's in the project, right? You can go and grab the component, right?
When can we add like I know you like my favorite tool in Toddle is the little CSS box that was completely unintended.
Yeah, yeah, that was
Because I could not figure out how to make backdrop filter blur in Toddle. I was like, oh, there is no setting for that. So I just
yeah,
went to the little CSS box and typed it in there. And I was like, this would be cool if we can like have AI generate the Toddle JSON format for pasting the components and just goes into the little CSS box and just like does all the CSS in there. Then we would just have to like apply to the whole settings.
yeah. I mean, you don't really need AI because it does, like if you paste it in, it does pass it, right?
Oh, it does?
Yeah, yeah, you can write CSS in here. So you can type anything you want to paste it in. It just passes
Wow.
line for line. But what we're actually probably doing, because we are going to get rid of the CSS box, but we're probably
Oh,
putting up, yeah, but we're replacing it with like you can switch between the visual and the CSS editor. Um, and we played
no
around with that a lot.
way.
We've been
Can you
experimenting a lot
show
and
us
so like,
that? Is it
uh,
possible?
well, I mean no, because not really. I can show you a version that I've been playing
Yeah.
around with, but that's
Yeah.
not going to be the one we ship.
But we're happy to see
Uh,
what you're playing around with just because Toddle is built in Toddle.
where
And I think it's cool to see how the team
here we
behind
are.
Toddle works inside of Toddle to make Toddle. Like, there's a lot of Toddle
Yeah,
here.
it's also practicing for when people are gonna start contributing, right?
Yeah.
So in this one, I need to change it here, right? So just gonna copy that. Instead of our browser extension, we're gonna use our CSS editor. So just in case it wasn't clear that this is not ready to be released, like
Yeah.
this is the button, right? This one, this is the so the idea here is you can toggle instead of having like at the bottom of your panel this box, we would get rid of that, but we would have an option for probably a better styled option for swapping over to a CSS editor, and
Where
where
do
it
I write
basically
this?
just lists all the files. And I played around a little bit with doing something like this, where like you still listing the property and it's quite assisted. And I think what we're probably doing is just actually doing like a code editor. I don't think I experimented with this. I never got the feeling that it was there. So I think it's more or less just going to be a code. It's actually going to be a little bit like what you see in Figma and the dev panel, right? But you will be able to edit it, right?
Very
And
nice.
so I think that works better. And I think the use case as such is probably mostly going to be like, I'm a developer. I want to understand what Toddle did there, right? Because
Yeah.
it's one to one, but what actually happened, right?
Yeah.
But
Very cool.
yeah, like
That's
it's a
exciting.
little bit inconvenient down the bottom, right?
I mean, I always work great with it. I think everybody loves the box.
Yeah, I mean, it became like one of our most beloved features.
Yes.
Um, it's also added like an almost infinite amount of headaches, but they're good headaches.
Great headaches.
Um, yeah, but so you end up with these weird problems where, like, let's say, what's a good example? Like border, for example, right? Oh, actually, even better, transforms, right? So we added a slide
Oh,
page for transforms, right? Where you can pick what kind of transform you have. Should it be a translate, rotate,
oh, that's the
scale?
old one. We have like now a new editor, right? The
Oh
new
yeah, yeah, yeah.
transform. Yeah, it's the old one.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is no branch,
Okay.
but so the problem with this one was like if it wasn't for the CSS box, like there are these different properties: translate, scale, rotate. Like these are built into CSS, and we could just use them. But before they came out, there was just one called translate, and you comma separated all these values. And so now that we had the CSS box, like all those projects out there had all sorts of CSS in them. So we can't just go and say, oh, we'll only support one way of doing it because, well, then all the people who put in their CSS their way, now it wouldn't show up correctly, right? It would look broken.
Oh,
So by having the CSS box, we kind of almost committed ourselves to saying, well, now we also need to have Toddle work with like all the different ways you could have written that CSS.
I
And
can
we
see that
probably
that's a
can't,
pain.
yeah, but we probably can't do it 100%. Like there might be scenarios where we'll just say like there's no way we can pass that and know for sure. Like there are selectors, like we don't let you paste in CSS selectors. You can only paste in rule sets, right? But on the flip side, it does also make Toddle better. Like it wasn't, we would absolutely not have done it if we didn't have to. But it does make Toddle better that you can, like the fact that you can paste in the CSS and it understands it and it does the right
Yes.
thing.
It's a very
Like
smart
the
tool.
interoperative like ability with
I
Figma,
mean,
with all these other platforms, like it
I'm
does make it
super
better.
happy that you have the HTML paste because I always paste it as in Webflow and like Webflow turns it into like a whole code embed. I'm like, no, 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 I want to still style it.
Yeah.
So
But
Toddle,
this
like,
is, I mean, the HTML parser is native in the browser, so it just seemed like an easy way of doing it. The reason why we added it was actually for icons, like so I can say tabler, right? So I can go in here and say I want this accessibility icon, and I can just click it, and then I can go and say paste, and then
oh,
I
this is
haven't
so
changed the
cool
color.
because like I used it only for that and
Uh,
ChatGPT generated code and I was like, I wonder
yeah.
what they thought in adding that feature if it was only made for those icons. But it turns
Oh
out it was
yeah, it was mainly for SVG, right? That's why it doesn't actually pass the styling yet. But then with the new AI feature, we'll add in that it understands that.
amazing. This is great. Toddle is like the most revolutionary low code or visual development tool. I just love it. I think it's just amazing.
Glad to hear it. Thank you. I mean, we're really excited about what the next 6 months are gonna be very heavy focused on. First of all, like getting Toddle ready to be open source, like making sure that you can self-host it any you want, but also really with a focus on opening it up so more people can get access to the editor, see how we build things there, everything we're building, and also giving them an opportunity to contribute, right?
I
Because I
would
think we see a lot of people in the community. It's like I would love to be able to go and help with this. There are issues that shows up sometimes. Like we had one where it was like, oh, it would be really great if the variables were sorted alphabetically, and it would. Like that's a great idea, right? And it's honestly not a very hard feature to make. Like it's
yeah,
not.
just
If you
add like a
understand
little
Toddle, it's
like
relatively easy, right?
yeah, you can just do
Yeah.
like a split filter kind of like to get like
Yeah.
their first character and then like sort it based on that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And so once you have that, you can just basically like if you know how to do that, you just be able to open up Toddle, like create a branch, fix that, and then say, hey, do you want to merge this? And we can just say, check.
Now, with how much custom code was Toddle built and how much was native? Do you have like a percentage, like 50% of everything is custom code with it, or something like that?
It's much less than this, but there's a long history to Toddle. So there's a lot of custom code that doesn't need to exist. So I'll show you, for example, we had one of the pages, editor page. Like some of these are like, so this is like the root page in the editor, right? And it goes 121 issues, and it's very angry. It's very angry about you incompetent waste of oxygen. Ah, that's harsh. Okay, that was a okay. Like, yeah, Linus got really angry about this one. But when you look at what they actually were, it's saying, hey, you're using a legacy format. And this is like a Toddle project only thing. Because before we built most of the formula set we have now, we had sort of a different idea about how this should work. And at the time, like this get formula right here, you can see the uppercase get. This was something that existed before. We actually want to get rid of that because we would replace it with the normal get that you use today. So you won't see
it
this
would look
in any
like
other
it looks
project.
like a get API call.
Yeah, it's not. And EQ is equals, which we call it now. And since we
Oh
can
Lord.
fit the word equals, probably a better name, right?
Yes.
And also the implementation. So we have a lot of that. So if you count all that, it's actually a lot of custom code. But all those are just things we haven't changed that. And there's a one-to-one native Toddle solution. If you remove that, like it's very little. This editor has like a on-load about like the connect to WebSocket is a native one, and I think listen for key event, like, but these are relatively small, right? Like it's just we haven't added native WebSocket
that's a good
support
idea.
yet, so
I
we
gotta
wrote our
make a
own.
video, WebSockets and Toddle, and I gotta build a plugin.
Yeah, I mean
In a
it's
package,
easy
a
to do, but
package.
we are going to add it to APIs, right? So
I'll be
you can use a
faster than you
WebSocket
though.
API. You will definitely be faster. And then we're using Post Talk Analytics, which is built in. We build in. So again, there's a few here, but we're not in the thousands of lines of code in total. We're in the hundreds.
That's amazing.
If we remove all the stuff that really doesn't need to be there. But as I say, there's a lot of it that's built before all of those features were added to Toddle, and therefore there's still, but it's not a lot, right? There's not a lot of code you need.
This is, I think, the best advertising that anybody could ever do for Toddle.
And I mean, there's no custom code in Toddle that isn't there just because we hadn't quite built the feature. Like say we have a custom action for connecting to the WebSockets because Toddle editor works with WebSockets, right? But we're absolutely going to add that to the editor, right? Because it's the other way that the browser communicates with the server, right? There's only two. We can afford to support both of them, right? So we're adding that, and then when we do that, then this WebSocket action is redundant. We can get rid of it, right?
That's amazing.
So there's really not a lot. I mean, I kind of lost track of exactly where everything is because it's a big project and we don't touch it that much, those native things yet. But we sort of go and clean them up every now and then. So there's really very little.
I mean, and you would say, like, you maintain Toddle every day. It's probably the biggest project ever built in Toddle. How maintainable is it? Or do you like get lost all the time? I mean, you certainly get a little bit lost with just because of everything that's in there, but
it's a big project, and like big projects are always complicated to navigate. Like you can't just escape that, right? Like everything scales with complexity. So if you look at like our number of pages, right, we have a lot of pages.
Wow.
So this same project is also our website and documentation and blog. It's actually all in the same project.
You have it all in Toddle in one project.
We have it all in one. And there's no good reason why we have that other than we didn't want to set up a separate domain, I think was I mean, I don't. Well, I think we'll probably extract it into a separate project sometime. But it's actually all the same. The website, the blog, it's all the same project.
And how do you handle
so there's
security? Since it was all built in Toddle, how do you like handle security with it? Or
in
like,
terms of like general sort of app security.
yeah, like, you know, just like general low-level app security, because, you know, maybe you have hackers or something. Like,
Yeah.
how secure is it to build in Toddle, and how easy is it to implement security features?
Yeah. So like there's a little bit of like we try and do as much we can in Toddle to take care of you.
Mhm.
So we have a very sort of principle like if this is a problem we can solve and we can solve it well and it doesn't hinder you, then we should solve it, right?
Yeah.
If we can solve it well and it almost certainly doesn't hinder you, then we should solve it, but give you an option of opting out if you need to, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that the most obvious example is probably like when we use authenticated APIs. So we have this session cookie that we asked you to set, and you can either set that like when you get it back from an API request, or if you're like navigating off to like Superbase and navigating back to your Toddle site, it can actually set that automatically,
Yeah.
right? And the way that works is it's set with what's called HTTP only. So like the Toddle app on the front end can never read that cookie. Like it knows it doesn't even know it's there actually. It has absolutely no idea there's a auth cookie. It just knows that when it sends off requests, they come back with data, but it just has no idea. So let's say you're building like a CMS system, right? And you're allowing people to type in HTML, and maybe you are not aware of the fact that that in itself is a potential massive security risk. Because if people can render HTML in your site, they might be able to render scripts in your site. And if they can render a script in your site, they can literally do anything, right? Like the second an attacker gets a script on your site, like they can do
Yes.
anything the app can do, right? Now, ultimately, we can't 100% remove that option. Like, we can't entirely protect you 100% because you have so much freedom in Toddle. There are ways you can do that. And there's that we really can't prevent entirely, right? And in this case, I don't think there's any way you can do it in native Toddle without a custom action. But since you have custom actions, like that gives you the full power and therefore also the responsibilities that comes with, right?
Yeah.
So but what we can do is say that even if that should happen, at least you can't steal the auth token.
You
And so
always
that's kind of
you always protect the backend. You always protect the thing. People may be able to load the virus on their own computer inside of the Toddle app if you give them the ability to write code in it,
yeah.
but it doesn't hit your backend if you of course use all the features and tools that Toddle can provide to you. And of course your
Yeah.
backend is
I
secure
mean,
too, and you don't post like
that
your
doesn't
API
mean they
endpoints on
can't do
Twitter.
like
Of course.
it doesn't mean you're entirely safe. It doesn't mean that
Yes.
they can't like potentially inject a script that lets you make a request that deletes some data in your backend, right? Like we
Mhm.
can't guarantee that, sure, but we can at least say that when the vast majority of attacks, which are bot attacks, it can't easily just grab your token and send it somewhere. Like that's not an option, right?
That's
So
amazing.
we always sort of have that approach. Like we wanna limit as much as possible, but without actually limiting what you can do.
Yes.
Um, and
Also, I mean, you're in Europe, and a lot of people always ask me, how does this work with European data stuff? I mean, thank God I don't have to deal with that. But for the people who have to deal with it, what do you have to say to them? I mean, because you're in Europe, so I think you have to deal with it.
absolutely, I personally I like the European data protection laws. I'm a big fan. I know it gives a lot of people headaches, but I'm of the firm belief that if you're gonna play around with people's personal data, you should,
Yes.
behave.
Yes.
I'm very like, and you will actually notice like it's a point of pride for us. Am I still? I don't know if I'm still sharing my screen.
Yeah, you're still sharing your screen.
Yeah, there's no cookie banners on this site, right? Like we didn't. There's no annoying pop up in your face saying cookies
Yes.
because I don't like them. I think they're incredibly annoying, and we spend a lot of time on our website, and we don't want your experience to be cookie banner, right? So
Mhm.
we didn't add one. And the way we get away with that is by not tracking you. And it's
Wow.
actually fairly easy. You don't need to
Just
do
on
much, right?
track.
Just don't track people. We still have analytics. We know how many people are coming. We also know how many unique visitors we have, but our definition of a unique is within a like capped at a 1 day basis, because that's the best you can do private wise, right? So we're sacrificing just a tiny bit of detail in our analytics, but for a much better user experience. So we made that very deliberate choice that we didn't want the cookie banner. We didn't want pop-ups in your face. We want you to enjoy our website the way we made it. So that's very much our approach. And like in terms of privacy and EU law, um, our servers are hosted on Cloudflare. And because, as I mentioned, it's a global network where each node is close to the customer, if you're in Europe, it's going to serve you from a Europe data center. That's something
No
Cloudflare
way.
built into that.
Wow.
So, and almost always going to be one right next to you, right? So
That's amazing.
you are always going to go through the client in Europe to a European data center to whatever backend you have, right? And
So
Cloudflare is,
as long as you don't add Google fonts, you're mostly good.
yeah, I mean, there are like, again, you have all the freedom to change this. Like, you can absolutely build a Toddle app that violates European laws. Like, that is 100% possible. As I say, adding Google fonts is an easy way of doing it. We're actually using Google fonts. Like, if you go in here, that's the wrong button. I hate that button. You probably do too. You need to get rid of it. If you click the logo, it goes back, and I always accidentally click it. But if you go in here and let's 1 second.
Are we in the wrong branch?
Oh, I think we might be. Let's do it on the. We'll do it in a new project. Toddle.new.
Oh,
Let's
that
not
that's a
screw wrong.
oh that thing is something that oh no way. I can do toddle.new and
Yeah, and it'll just create a new project for you, and it's gonna automatically generate an ID, but you can change it later if you want.
here you go. Now I'm going to build like a robot that's going to run Puppeteer to build toddle apps.
Yeah, don't let me know if you're gonna do that.
Ah.
Okay, but anyway, the point is here on your theme, you can go and add fonts, right? And if I'm adding a font, like what am I? Dibanacil, right? This is us browsing Google fonts, right?
Yeah.
But when we're actually adding them to the site, we're not adding a link to Google fonts. We're again running it through our server, so
No
we're not
way.
enable Google tracking on your site, right?
So you can add Google fonts in Toddle and
Mm,
stay compliant.
yeah, because we're not serving them from Google servers, and we're not tracking based on fonts.
This is amazing. I love how well thought out Toddle is, not just from a technical approach, but also from a legal and from a compliance approach. This is just amazing.
Well, I think I mean, it's both the sort of nice thing about building on the Toddle, and that like it makes the scope of something like Toddle much bigger. But if you're serious about building a tool for professional software companies that's scalable, that you can use to build these things, right?
Mhm.
Like, you do need a lot of things. Like
Yes.
the base level is very high. And I mean, I worked on Toddle for quite a while before we even got around to release it. From we found the company, there was another 6 months before we went into beta, right? Because there is
Yeah.
a lot of things you need doing. Also, if maybe it's sometimes like it feels like the editor itself has a lot of features but could have had a lot more. But there's a lot of other things you need to consider when you're building
Yes.
for a professional audience, right?
You don't want to break everyone's app just by adding this new button.
No, I very strongly feel like you gotta, like, if you're building for an audience, and whether
Oh,
they're professional already or whether they're like on their way to be, right, you gotta be. Oh yeah, that's secret.
it says V2. Can we click on
Yeah.
V2 and
So this is I mean, it's still being designed, it's still being updated. But it's essentially the same layout. I think the biggest thing is we're adding tabs instead. It makes it a little bit easier to see and
Yeah.
navigate. And yeah,
Oh,
we're adding the
oh,
redirect rules.
server side fetching. Ooh.
Yeah, so Toddle today has this thing where if you're on a page and you create an API and it's set to auto fetch, which we now have indication of what that actually means. So if you set it to auto fetch, it'll automatically render server side, right? So if you're building something that's public, like let's say you're building the next Shopify, right? Those sites got to be indexed, they got to have a high SEO, and they got to be fast. And
Yeah.
ideally, you want to render them server side, and you want to render them server side with the content, right? So you want to go and fetch your product catalog from the database, then you want to render that on the server and send it off, right? And today you can do that in Toddle, but you do that by making sure the API is in the page. Any API that's in a component further down the tree doesn't get rendered on the initial server-side render. And that sort of works fine, except nobody knows because it's not obvious, right? It's in our documentation, but I mean,
Who
not
reads
everybody
it?
read that. Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah,
Especially when we have an AI bot that tells you how to build things, right? So
exactly.
what we wanted to do is basically saying, I want you to be able to control every single API. Should this be rendered on the server or should it not? So you can basically go and say, yes, I want this to be fetched on the server. I don't want to be fetched during server-side rendering. And the other thing is, we talked about privacy and compliance. You can
Yeah.
decide if you want to proxy the request. And proxy here means sending it through our data center.
To make sure
You can
that
also
everything
decide
is compliant and comes from from a local
exactly,
server.
but you can and I mean obviously our services, but it maybe you're building like a bank or something extremely security sensitive, and you basically don't want to trust anyone. So you want your requests go directly from the customer's browser to your backend and not touch any of our servers on the way. Well, then you turn off server-side fetching and you turn off proxying request, and then that request will never touch our server. Like your data never runs through our server. So now you have a complete setup. It's like, okay, I just never have to worry about that.
So you could
The flip
even,
side is the authentication cookie and how you store that. You now have to handle that yourself. But we're giving you a lot of options for doing that, right?
but you have full control to even build extensive things for banks that meet strict compliance standards inside of
Yeah,
Toddle without, and
because you
actually
can you
I have a client who actually uses this specific use case, that Toddle is so flexible and so secure because it is very important for him, because he's doing a lot of advanced stuff, and Toddle was the smartest decision for him.
good to hear. But yeah, you can if you don't want your data to touch any of our servers ever, like you have that option, right?
Amazing. Also,
And then I
can
think
we add like a play button? Because this is super annoying.
yeah, yeah,
Because I
yeah.
always have to turn on auto fetch off and auto fetch on to test APIs that are not on auto fetch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're definitely adding one because also if you're in a post request, you want to test it, right?
Yes, like a play
Um,
button here would
so
be great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely on the in the cards for this one. We also have response streaming, but we don't have any of the UI set up yet because this is still a few weeks away from being ready, right? But we
Amazing.
found a way to do response streaming that's not super annoying.
Oh
Response
yeah.
streaming is almost entirely only for AI. Like
I did a lot
nobody
of
ever
things
really
on
used it for anything else.
I did a lot of
But
things on it, and just so that you know, if you have to always, like define the chunks, and that's a pain. Your code editor always breaks my line in its autocorrect. So every time I open the action, the code, it's like, auto formatting, because you
yeah,
use like the VS Code one, and it has this annoying auto format feature. So every
yeah.
time I open the action, it auto formats, and then I have to go back to Claude, copy my code, paste it
Yeah.
in there so it has the original formatting.
We did log it as something we need to fix. I think I have like in my code where it's like generates the line break from a key code, like char from key
Yes.
code, which is super weird. But the basic idea here is for response streaming is that you can opt in. Like if you say you want response streaming, you can go and say, okay, but I want to use a text decoder. because you get the data in binary. I can want to use a text decoder automatically. That's normally a thing you have to write in code or paste from wherever. And then you can set a delimiter. You can say, like, so if you're passing from OpenAI, they have like a double line break between all their chunks, because the actual data doesn't necessarily come in the right chunks aligned properly with the actual like data from OpenAI, right? So it might, like, a chunk can be half a JSON object, but with the delimiter you can actually tell the API here that no, I don't want every chunk coming from the server. I just want every time it hits the delimiter, and then you only get the
Mm.
packages as they're streamed from the server. So that actually means that setting up something like OpenAI response streaming or any of the other AI response streaming becomes really easy to do in Toddle.
And is there also somewhere where Toddle will announce secrets so we can make API calls directly from Toddle using like your Cloudflare infrastructure without having to set up our own edge functions or things in the middle?
Yes, we're adding that as well.
Perfect. And then if you're like a
Uh,
bank and you're super secretive, but still are not secretive enough to use OpenAI, you can also then do this through Xano, technically.
yeah, but I think the thing to remember around secrets is that it's only really needed when you need to call an API that requires an API key, but you don't require the user to authenticate.
Yes.
So in most cases, the secret is not actually the solution, because you still want to
Yes.
know, like, you still want that request to go by a backend that says, yes, they're allowed to do this, right?
You have 500 credits left, but if you're like 500 in the negative, you want to say you have no credits left. Buy
Exactly, right.
more.
You want those. You in most cases for real applications, you want them to run through a backend. For
Yes.
demo application or for useless applications, which Toddle is also great for, like the API secret is going to be a really nice addition. Yeah.
Yes. That's amazing. I mean, I'm so excited for V2 of the API version. You gotta get it out pretty fast. We're
Yeah,
waiting
I
for
think
it.
we're not too far away from from getting a release out to the first group of users. But we're sort of staging it a bit.
But this is super exciting. I'm super excited to see all the changes that are going to be happening to Toddle. I think it is the best no code tool, the best visual no programming tool that we have on the market. I mean, I'm sure because you give your competitors so many ideas. I think there are going to be a lot more competitors trying to imitate what you do. But I think the good part about that is that will also keep you fired up to make Toddle even better. So I think
Yeah, I
and the
mean,
way the team
for
moves
sure,
is
right?
just
I
quick.
think Bubble introduced branching not too long ago, right?
Maybe it's just because of you.
It's not the same branching, but I understand it's a lot better than what was before, right? And I
Yes.
know WeWeb introduced components, which I think we were the first platform to pioneer, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the fact that there's more here, we have no at all no sort of aim to be the only platform on the web. Like, that's not at all in our goal.
Yeah.
We think like the whole idea of visual programming is such a moonshot that we don't need to worry about whether there are other platforms there. We need to worry about, can we convince the mainstream developer community that this idea actually is the future and has real merits, and that's something they should invest in and be interested in, right? There's absolutely no reason to look at other tools and say, like, oh, can we get their users, right?
I mean, I
There's
think you're
so
definitely
many
on the right
developers in the
way.
world.
I think you're definitely on the right way, and I think that Toddle uh is an amazing tool. Um, because you don't have to stay in this ecosystem. You can compose it into other technologies as well with the components, and how modular and flexible it is shows you how well thought out the whole system behind this visual programming tool is. And I've been doing this since a few years now, and I have never seen something that is as complex and as simple as Toddle at the same time.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. So how about you stop sharing your screen for the end so people can see your beautiful face?
There we are.
Perfect. So is there anything that you wanna tell the people watching besides signing up for Toddle right now if they haven't already?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, go and try it out, and also be aware that it's like if you're coming from coding, it's a little bit different than what you're used to. You probably pick it up fairly quickly, but obviously, it's a new world, and understanding which part that are more efficient and which part that can initially feel less a bit efficient can take a little while. But make sure you give it a good try. If you're coming from no-code platforms, I think a lot of people have a little bit of a shock with Toddle because it is very different. Like
I
it
saw
is
some
kind
things on
of
Twitter.
closer to, yeah,
There was some, it's a scam. They don't have native integrations.
yeah. But she's a big Toddle user now, so but I mean, and I totally get it, right? Like if you think Toddle is a no-code tool when you come in, because obviously you don't write code, so it makes sense. But most no-code tools are really in the designed for non-technical people or people who are
Yeah.
not aspiring to be doing this full time. And Toddle is that's not our goal, right? It's nice that it kind of works out that way. Like it is a really good tool for beginners, but that's not our design goal. We just want to make it easy for experienced people and efficient for experienced people. And in doing that, I mean, simplicity always wins. So it also becomes easier. But that's not really the point. And therefore it's actually quite different than most no-code tools in many ways.
That's amazing. So, Andreas, thank you so much for taking the time to just, you know, tell everyone what Toddle is and just give us like some things that we have never seen before about Toddle. Also, I gotta ask, any specific reason why it's called Toddle? Or you just made a
Um, no, actually, my wife came up with the name a long time ago. Um, and I played around with a lot of different ideas. At some point, it was gonna be called Web3. This was before Web3 really got big. Like I think the term had been coined, but I hadn't heard about it because the idea seemed like okay, like Web 2 was everybody's hosted on Facebook, and Web 3 is reclaim it and build your own apps, right? That seemed like a sensible thing, a little bit ambitious, a little bit arrogant. I kind of liked it, and then that kind of didn't work out because someone stole my vision for the future of the web.
So
Um,
you are actually the real inventor of Web3, and then some idiot stole it.
No, I don't. I'm okay. I don't need to be credited with that. I'll live without. No, that's okay. But that name was actually in the mix for a while. There was a lot of different things, and it was like, what should we call it? And it everything was called
I
Web
gotta name,
something.
I gotta give this a heading. Interview with Toddle CEO, why it used to be Web3.
Oh, we used to joke. We used to joke when we were fundraising because the first round Web 3 was still quite big. Like right now, it's not a good time to raise
No,
funds if you're a blockchain company. But
no.
the fundamental idea of the blockchain of like hashing the last block and including that in the next one is also how Git works.
There you go. So you're
And
blockchain.
therefore it's also how Toddle works because we copied Git. So Toddle commits like everything you do is technically a blockchain. It just
So
doesn't have that
Toddle
whole
is, and I got clickbait. Here you go. Now the title
you
will be
got your big
Toddle is the
the
blockchain.
blockchain, yeah. It doesn't have like everything that normally makes blockchain technologies blockchain, like the whole like sort of agreement protocol and anything like that, right? But it does have that idea of creating those chain of blocks so you can verify every step, right?
From blockchain to Toddle.
Yeah,
Amazing. Thank you so
never
much
gonna
for being
regret
here.
this.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
You're
And
very welcome.
yeah, everybody, please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And I think Andreas will be also answering maybe some of the comments. I would be happy if he does. And
Absolutely.
yeah, you have to check out absolutely Toddle because it is a great tool. Go to toddledev.com and create your account and play around with it. And let me know or let us know what you think about it. Thank you so much, and bye bye.